Hi, this is Sandy. Welcome to my art channel. I hope you're doing good and you're having a great week so far. If you're new around here, my name's Sandy. I make videos about art and creativity. And today in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about how creative journaling can be helpful to keep that creative spark alive during the winter months when we don't have much energy. So in this video, I show how I make a Concertina style journal, and I make it from scratch, just from what I've got lying around the house, and I'll show you how you can make one too. I then show you how I make the front and back cover for it, and I also go into materials that I think are good for creative journaling, or just give some ideas around materials you could use. Talk a little bit about what's inspiring me and why I want to make the journal, and then I also kind of dip into how you can get started on that first kind of spread if you need a bit of inspiration, either if you want to make the journal with me or if you just want someone to kind of journal along with, then this video might be for you. So let's get into it. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the inspiration for this video and for this journal that I'm going to make. So I've been really inspired lately by old books. I love going to old bookstores and looking at the books, and I often purchase little books here or there that are reasonably priced, that are old and kind of interesting. And I've recently picked up a couple. This is a little poetry book from the 1800s, and it's got like this lovely little note in it. And the thing I'm really interested in is the hidden aspects of these books, and just like the kind of way that they were put together so well. There's a lot of care taken in the binding of them and how they're made. And I wanted to create a journal with that kind of precious feeling to it, but a journal that I'm not going to be too precious about, if that makes sense. So I want to make it from scratch, kind of make sure it's really well loved and well used and that kind of thing. So another aspect of these kind of books that I really enjoy is they have these kind of like hidden gems or hidden aspects to them. So, for example, the book with the green cover, that's a book about my county, Hampshire, and it was falling to bits a little bit. But this one has loads of little kind of hidden photographs and like little maps, and you can just pull them out. It's really tactile, and I just just want to go through it and kind of like touch the pages and just interact with it. And that's the aspect I'm really enjoying and I'm inspired by. I'm also really inspired by the kind of black and white pictures, the kind of vintage feel of it, and especially loving the fact that, for example, on the back cover, there's like a little hidden pocket. So the idea of kind of like hidden treasures, hidden pockets, like the little envelopes with kind of notes in, things like that. So I wanted to make a journal for myself that would kind of scratch that kind of itch, if that makes sense. And something that's also going to suit the time of year. So it's winter, I'm not going out much. Um, Sometimes you don't have much energy and you just want to kind of be creative, but you don't really kind of want to grab a load of paints. So the idea is I've gathered some materials. I've got these pieces that I've cut from cereal boxes and this antique kind of rustic paper that I have. And what I've done is basically you start with an A4 sheet of paper, fold it in half widthways, and then simply just tape them together at the edges. It's really easy. I put this together before I made the video. I hope it's apparent what I've done. It's literally just an A4 piece of paper folded in half, and then you just tape it side by side to the next piece. But I just left a slight gap in between the pages because the idea of this journal is it's a really low pressure journal. Sometimes, I don't know if you're like me, I buy journals and then I don't always finish them. So this is a perfect way of using materials you already have and then not being bound to a really big sketchbook. And, it can be as big or small a project as you like. So you can just start with, I mean, mine's about 20 pages. But the idea is you can kind of add to it as you go along if you want to. You're not tied into a large sketchbook that you have to finish. or large creative journal that you don't have to finish. And if you do a spread you don't like, you can kind of take the tape off the back or kind of cut a section out and then just kind of start again, if that makes sense. So really good, resourceful, handmade journal. That's the idea of this kind of project, if that makes sense. Really personalize it. So I'm going to make my own front covers for it. And also, I'm going to talk through materials that I'm going to be using just in case it gives anyone some ideas. So what I have done so far is I've gathered some stuff for collage. So as winter can be quite, a low energy season sometimes, it gets darker, you're going out less, sometimes you have a bit less energy or you're trying to conserve energy after work and you're a bit tired, but you still feel creative. The idea is to give yourself that kind of opportunity to still be creative, even if you don't want to get a load of paints out. So collage might be a good option for a creative journal spread. So I've gathered some materials that I already have. So I've got some old book pages that I've just kind of coffee stained and dyed with acrylic inks and Tim Holtz distressed ink sprays and things like that. So I've got a load of those. I've also got some kind of tissue paper, some dyed napkins, collage papers, jelly plate prints, pieces from newspaper, magazines, just stuff that I can use for a kind of first layer of collage, things to glue down and give a bit of a background, if that makes sense. So gather what you have. It could be, just plain printer paper, and you can just kind of like put some ink on it, or like watercolor and just kind of stain it up a bit, or yeah, just anything, just being creative with what you already have, really. So this is kind of background collage material. That's the first kind of tip on materials, and just things that you have lying around the house that might be good for collage and background materials. So I was going through my paper stash, and my dad has these old Look and Learn magazines. They're from the 60s, and I've been using them for collage material and ephemera and things. And I found these really nice spreads of kind of vintage florals, and I just scrunched them up, and kind of that cracked the pages a little bit, and some of the ink rubbed off, and it's created this really lovely kind of vintage old effect. So I was thinking I'm going to use these pages as my covers. So the one in the black, I thought that was a really kind of wintry piece and perfect for this journal. So I'm going to use that one for the front cover. And I thought the other one I would use for the back cover. Just really kind of nice images. And again, kind of really cheap kind of materials you already have. And I'm just going to use some matte medium in a bit and secure them to these pieces of cardboard that I've cut off to make the front cover. So I'm just kind of thinking, what way would they look good? What way do I want them? So excited to do that, and I will do that shortly. But I'm just going to talk through a few more ideas for kind of gathering supplies and materials that might be good for a creative journal, in my opinion. And as I mentioned, I've got a load of Look and Learn magazines. They're amazing. They're really old, kind of 1960s, and my dad has a big pile of them. But he was going to throw them out, so perfect for use for junk journaling, collage, art journaling, kind of ephemera. So I've just cut a load of the images out that I found kind of interesting and would be good for building up kind of collage pages. You could also kind of use certain images from magazines that you find interesting to kind of write about in your journal, kind of like create a narrative around them, like what do they bring up for you, that kind of thing. So I've just cut out some of these kind of vintage flowers, they had kind of like old stamp pictures and pictures of old buildings, which I love, kind of old architecture, really inspires me, kind of nice little landscapes with little figures on, um, old kind of portraiture photographs, just loads to kind of pick up and put a collage together if you don't have much energy. So, if you want to pick the journal up and do a painting spread, you can, but then if you're not feeling it, you don't have much energy, then you've still got a load of materials you can just grab and still be creative with. So that's why I'm going with kind of the name Creative Journal, just an outlet for your creativity in the winter months, and it can be whatever you want it to be. And I'm just gathering some materials that I have around the house, so using what I have and also images that I find interesting and or inspiring. And yeah, just a load of images from magazines that are just kind of interesting and will be kind of good to use when you're kind of, you know, not really feeling it and you just want some materials just to chuck together. You could also kind of go through books of, you know, you can get specific ephemera books, and I've got a couple of those, and just cut things out and just kind of get a nice little stash together of things that you can use and kind of keep them on your desk. Along with the journal, if you make it, or you can just get your own journal or use a journal that you kind of haven't started yet. That might be a good idea as well. So I also have this kind of tin, and it's got some other bits of ephemera. So I was thinking it's good to have kind of things for focal points. I also have some kind of blocks of text that I kind of find interesting, and yeah, just loads of stuff from old magazines really. But specifically I wanted to talk about focal points. So if you have already got a load of bits and bobs that you could, you know, do a journal spread about. I mean, I've got these old, well, they're not old, but some mini paintings that I've done, and I thought they would be, might be nice to kind of journal about and use as a focal point. You can also use little bits and bobs like these, like little butterflies from kind of even napkins, or like what's it called, decoupage paper. And I've just cut out little elements from an ephemera book that I have, and I just thought they might be quite nice. Some of them still have that kind of vintage feel to them. I'm not specifically going to kind of hem myself in with one subject because I want to be free. You know, I want to be able to pick this journal up and just be able to create in it, you know. But I'm just picking some items that I kind of like and that inspire me. Um, this was a butterfly that was on a card that was given to me, so I just kind of took that off. Again, these little jars, I love them. They're so pretty. Got some ideas of what I want to do with those. Um, so yeah, I hope that gives you some ideas, just ideas for things that you can, you know, kind of have a focal point. So there's also sentiments. So, you know, having images that you can journal about, and then sentiments to kind of emphasize what you'd like to talk about. And there's different ways of doing that. So you can use things like these alphabet stamps. Just grab yourself a little ink pad, and then you can just write out your own sentiments. That's a nice way to kind of illustrate your journal, I suppose. Adding words, adding poetry, things like that. Also, obviously, want to make sure you've got things to hand that you're going to need, like scissors and glue sticks. Um, a good old fashioned fountain pen, things like that, or just a biro. You don't need fancy materials at all. Another couple of things that I thought might be nice to use, I've got tissue paper. So I was thinking for the hidden elements, they might be nice to kind of do little envelopes and put things in, or to kind of make hidden little flaps to kind of hide pictures underneath and things like that, or pockets. I also have these Tim Holtz ink stamps. You don't have to use Tim Holtz, you can use any ink pads you want, but you could kind of use ink pads that are antique colours and kind of stain your papers and your photographs to make it look all kind of interesting. Also, I love to use stencils, and they'd be good to kind of use on your journal pages, just kind of to give an element of interest, that kind of thing. And I've got this, I think it's called a ink brush, or I've seen people use it just with stencils, and I use it quite a lot with my ink stamps. Just to, I find ink stamps and stencils really good because they tend to be more accurate, and the paint doesn't, you know, when you're using acrylics, it can be quite annoying if the paint's too thin and the paint goes everywhere. I mean, I still use it, but I find ink stamps just nicer to use with stencils really. And you can also kind of stencil, like for example, little leaves or patterns onto white pieces of paper and cut them out and use them as elements and ephemera to go with your journal. So just a few ideas of things that I like to use when journaling, and just wanted to mention them just in case it was kind of helpful. I also have, this is like a writing ink. It's a Winsor & Newton writing ink. It's just like a brown colour. And this is also fun to kind of stain pages or stain photographs, or just put little kind of like splashes and things like that. So now we've discussed some ideas for materials that might be useful, I am going to add the front cover to my journal. And I'm just going to show you how I did that, just in case anyone's interested. If not, I'll put timestamps on this video and you can just skip to the next part where I'll be attempting doing the first spread just to dip into the journal. So what I'm doing is I'm going to use some matte medium as an adhesive and some black gesso. So I'm going to cover the cardboard in black gesso just because on the back side of it that's going to be attached to my journal, I want that to not be like a cereal box, which is what I cut these from. I don't know if I mentioned that. These are just from some cereal boxes. Um, so it's still quite flexible, so easy to cut. And I'm just covering them with black gesso just because like this is going to be the back side and I don't want that showing through onto my journal. So I'm just covering those with black gesso and I'm going to wait for that to dry and then I'm going to adhere the magazine pages onto the cardboard with a matte medium. So these are my front covers covered in gesso and they are now dry. So that was both sides. And I'm now just positioning my magazine page for my front cover on the cardboard just to see how I want my design to appear. I don't know if I mentioned these are just cardboard from cereal boxes, so they're quite flexible still. I quite like a bit of flexibility in my journal, but you could use whatever you like. I just found them quite easy to cut. I didn't want to be fighting with, anything really stiff, so I just did them out of kind of like a cereal box cardboard. And I just cut them slightly bigger than the pages of my journal, just so there's a bit of overlap and a bit of protection for the pages. But the pages are still kind of showing out the side, which I kind of wanted. I wanted it to look kind of rustic and old, a bit like it was a book falling to bits, kind of just to get that effect. But you can cut it to how, you like it to your own taste, really. So I've cut out the cover, the magazine page, and again, I've kind of made that slightly bigger than the front cover. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the corners off with a craft knife, just so it will give me kind of edges or flaps to wrap around my journal to keep it nice and secure and to just give that kind of like book effect. And the reason I put the gesso on there is because a bit of that is going to show through and I didn't want it to just look like a cereal box, if that makes sense. And you don't have to be fussy about this if you don't want to be, or if you want to be more precise, that's completely up to you. But I'm, intentionally being quite free with it because I'm intending to cover that up eventually anyway, just to do some collage over it and maybe add a pocket or like an envelope to put kind of keepsakes in or little messages or notes or reminders or things like that, really, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm just applying again matte medium to both the cardboard and also to the book page, and I'm going to do that on both sides. The reason I'm using a matte medium is because my magazine page is very flimsy, so I don't want to put a lot of pressure on it with a glue stick because it might rip it. So I'm just using a more fluid adhesive for that, and I'm now just wrapping those corners over to finish my front cover. So my covers are now dry and this is how they look. I'm super happy with them so far. I think they are incredible. I love that kind of vintage, distressed vibe. It's exactly what I was going for. It's really given me that old kind of book feeling. So loving that aspect. And I might add a kind of quote on the front at some point, but I'm not sure what that quote's going to be yet. So I'm just going to leave that for now. Also, I'm not going to secure the back cover until the end because I'm not sure if I'm going to want to add more pages to it yet or not. I don't know. I'm just going to let that kind of play itself out and I'll add the cover kind of later on in the journal journey. But now I'm just going to show you how I adhere the front cover now to the journal itself. So for this part of the process, I'm happy to use a kind of Pritt stick because I've added the matte medium to the front and the back. It's a lot more robust now. So I'm just going to cover the cardboard front cover at the back in glue completely and the front page of the journal. And I'm going to position that kind of a little bit further away from the kind of bend of the journal and a bit more towards kind of overlapping the front cover, if that makes sense, because you want to be able to bend it properly. And I'm just securing it down properly, making sure that the edges are fully covered. So that's all dry again, and this is what we have. So super happy with this. So you can kind of, even though it's a concertina style, you can just have it as like a little sketchbook or creative journal, or you can just use it as a concertina sketchbook, or you can just write in it as a journal or scrapbook or junk journal, something like that. And you can modify it as you wish, add more pages. You know, like I said, if you're not happy with the spread, you can kind of just take a section out and then re-secure it, and then kind of add that back cover to the back of it once you're done. And you've just got this lovely little kind of keepsake creative project for winter, or yeah, it can be whatever you want it to be, really. So I'm just going to do my first spread and get straight stuck into this journal. If you'd like to journal with me, then feel free, that would be great. Or, you know, if you just want some inspiration and just want to watch someone sticking some paper down, then let's get into it. So I thought I would just go over quickly materials that I've mentioned just to make it easier for people to kind of remember, kind of ideas for getting started if you wanted to kind of start a creative journaling habit. So it's a good idea to kind of have a load of supplies that inspire you and have different elements. So it's good to have background elements, so like collage papers, newspaper with text, magazines, decoupage paper, jelly plate prints, things like that. So like a variety of different background materials like tissue paper and stuff with prints and plain, things like that, so you can just kind of contrast, or even like brown kind of packaging paper, things like that. We also talked about kind of foreground bits and bobs, kind of like floral pieces, bits from magazines, things like that, just to build up some layers. You could also use washi tape, have embellishments, so things you can cut out and stick on, like little birds, butterflies, things like that. You can use things for focal points, so things to journal about, so things like photos from magazines. You could do a little sketch of something, things like that, ephemera, little bits and bobs like that. Also having things like sentiments, written words, things you can stamp sentiments from. You can buy quotes, you can write a load of quotes down that you like, use poetry, things like that. You can also use other supplies like watercolor paints or acrylic paints, stencils, ink pads, things like that. Really just using what you have. Book pages are great to use. For me, it's really just about kind of how grounding it is to do creative activities, and, you know, just like ripping paper and gluing and painting and drawing and cutting. Those kind of natural sounds are just really relaxing for your nervous system. It can just, you know, really kind of bring you back into your body, bring you back into the real world away from the screens, and just has that really calming, safe feeling, and just, yeah, just gets you back into a more kind of peaceful state. So it's really kind of helpful for that. It's really healthy, kind of gets you kind of back in your body, like I said, and gets those endorphins going. You feel a sense of achievement, and, you know, like, just gives you that time with yourself, time to reflect, time to be with yourself, time to kind of think about what you want, where you want to go, and just gets you in that flow state. Just, you know, just those nice, happy kind of chemicals. Even just the feeling of tearing paper is kind of therapeutic to me. I don't know if anyone else gets that feeling, but it's just nice to have a creative habit that you can just dip into and do it regularly, just to give yourself that kind of time for self care, reflection, and rest, really. Rest for your brain, rest for your nervous system. And I just find it helps me to feel better, you know, just playing with materials, getting, into that nice quiet headspace. It's nice and peaceful. That's what I find really valuable about this process. And I think that winter is the perfect time to be introspective. So I am now trying to just cover up those elements with the brown kind of paper, because to me it kind of looks like a giraffe. I'm not going for safari or giraffe theme. So I've just got a little quote from a book about winter, and I'm just kind of covering some of that up just so that I'm a bit more happy with that aspect, because I wasn't loving it and I much prefer that. So the picture that I've chosen to journal around, it's kind of around the idea of winter and how, even though it looks bare, there's still growth happening, and winter is necessary. And, sometimes times of rest is necessary for things to grow in the future. It's kind of that kind of thing. And I've chosen a quote by Catherine May to emphasize that. And I'm really just kind of gluing elements down and building up those layers just to give the page some interest. So I've picked another image. So this represents the growth that happens that we don't necessarily see. And what I thought I would do is just hide that with my quote. So kind of it's like a window, and then it kind of represents that, the seeds we plant now, we might not necessarily see yet, but they're still kind of growing in the background, kind of to be fruitful later on, if that makes sense. So I guess it's around the idea that even though we can't always see what's happening, it's to just kind of like trust and have faith that things, happen in their own time, and just trust your kind of creative rhythms as well, if that makes sense, and the rhythms of nature, that kind of thing. So that's what I'm going for. And I'm now just kind of adding some gold with acrylic paint and an ink brush through a stencil, just trying to give some more interest. So I've secured my quote. I just used a bit of washi tape, and I have my quote, and it's hiding that kind of image of, growth in the future, that kind of thing. And it's got that nice kind of like tactile tissue paper quote, and you can just kind of like move it back and forth. And it's got that nice, yeah, like I said, tactile kind of nature to it. And this isn't necessarily finished. It's just for today. That's kind of where I feel like I'm going to end things. And I can always add things to it later. It's a work in progress. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now. So that's that. So was super happy with this journal, and I'm not going to kind of be too stuck on what I'm going to use it for. I just want it to be used, and I want it to be, freeing. The idea is just to gather stuff that you can use if you have low energy, but then if you feel like painting in it, and spending a lot of time in it, then you're also free to do that. Or you could just write in it. It's really just, it can be whatever you want it to be. So, as a little additive, I thought this would be a nice little thing to do. So, I bought some vine, what's it called? Vine roll. It's like just a roll of kind of like twine with some like foliage on it. I bought this from the range. It was like 99p. And I just couldn't resist. I thought it'd be a nice way of securing our journal together, like a little wraparound for it, because I can imagine this is going to get quite beefy. And it was really simple to do. So I just put a hole through the back cover with like a hole punch, and through the last page. I'm not going to secure it yet. I've just put it through just to show you, and then kind of like tied a knot in it through the last page. And it's created this really nice kind of wraparound, way of like securing the book together. So if it gets quite big, you can kind of keep it all together. And it doesn't just look quite nice, it's just really kind of nice to secure it and keep it safe. So I thought that was, just like a nice little way to kind of finish it off. So that's about it from me. I hope some of this was helpful. I hope it's given some ideas of how to kind of start a creative habit during these kind of colder, darker winter months. And yeah, hope you're looking after yourselves, and thanks very much for watching, and I hope you have a great week. Thanks again. Bye.